And now give me a second here to share my screen. And what we are going to be doing is what's called solving equations with parentheses. So if you want to get everything titled and stuff like that for today. 1 second, make sure this works. There we go. All right. We're working on solving equations, like I said, with parentheses. So we're combining the idea of the distribution property with the ideas of what we talked about yesterday with solving our two-step equations. Okay. So just like yesterday, I'll kind of work through an example on my own. We'll form a list of steps. And then from there, we'll do a couple more examples just to solidify this process for us. And then we'll move on to the ALEKS assignment. Sound good? Okay. The first thing that we should notice is that we have parentheses in our equation. Now, anytime that we have parentheses, there should be a green light in our head to say, all right, I need to distribute, right? There's a number on the outside of those parentheses that I need to multiply to each term inside, okay? So that's my first goal, is to distribute that term. So when I distribute, remember the distribution process, right? Kind of annotate it with these arrows here. So I know I'm doing 9 times x plus 9 times 2, right? And as you progress through, you don't need to necessarily show this step with your parentheses or anything like that. You'll eventually be able to say, well, I know that 9x or 9 times x is just 9x, 9 times 2 is 18. I'm just going to write the results underneath, right? So you can kind of skip that line. On the right-hand side of my equation, I still just have that value, that's 63. So nothing's really going to change there for me, right? There's nothing on either side of my equation other than the distribution on one side, the term on the other. All right. Well, like I just said, 9 times x is going to give me 9x, right? And 9 times 2 is going to give me 18. So after I distribute, I'm trying to simplify my values there, right? Multiplying all those terms together. Everybody good so far? Well, think back to what we did yesterday in class, right? Our objective in all these problems when we're solving equations is to get a value for that variable, right? So I'm trying to get x, my variable, by itself. In order to do that, I need to get rid of addition and subtraction first. So what is that extra term that I need to move to the other side right now? 18, right? If I truly am getting rid of addition and subtraction, I need to move the 18. And I do that by, if this is positive 18, subtracting 18 from both sides, right? Because I'm trying to get rid of it on the left-hand side by making it 0. But whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other, right? Well, 18 minus 18 is going to cancel, and I'm left with 9x. (63 minus 18 is going to give me 45. All right. So just simplifying on both sides, the positive 18, the negative 18 will cancel, left with 9x. 63 and the negative 18 becomes 45.
You have a question?
X equals what? 5. How did you get that? What do I have to do on both sides to get x entirely by itself? Divide by 9, right? Notice that the 9 and the x are being multiplied together. Well, what's the opposite of multiplication? Division, right? We have to work with those what's called inverse operations. So for example, here, if I have addition, to get that by itself, I'm going to subtract. Here, if I'm using multiplication, to get that by itself, I'm going to divide on both sides. So you knew that x was equal to 5, but now you know the process as to how we get that, right? So x is equal to 5. And then this here would be my final answer. Are there any questions about what I did to get that final solution. Okay. As always, what I want to show you each time that you do this, just so we have a good understanding of how we got our answer and how this works, you can always take that value you get for your variable and plug it back into the original equation, right? We did this when we were always checking our solutions to make sure it is, in fact, the correct solution. When I do that, if I plug in 5 for x, right, I have 9 times 5 plus 2 is equal to 63. Well, what's 5 plus 2? 7. And what's 9 times 7? What's that? 63. Well, notice I have the same thing on both sides. So when I plugged in 5, I found that that in fact was the correct solution. So x equals 5 is my final answer. Okay. Any questions about that first example, whether it was the process in general or the check? Everybody good? Isaiah, you have a question? So let's go back now and form a list of steps. What was the first thing that I did? So this process right here is called what? When I multiply this 9, distribute. Good. So that's going to be your first step here. Whenever you see something with parentheses, you want to distribute. Okay. And when you distribute, you're just multiplying that one term on the outside by each term on the inside of your parentheses. A lot of times it'll have a variable, right? My next step, what did I do right here with this 18? Subtracted on both sides. So I got rid of a term using addition or subtraction, right? And it's similar to what we saw yesterday. So get rid of any addition or subtraction. I'm going to write plus / minus to symbolize addition and subtraction, right? So get rid of those extra terms. If you have addition, subtract on both sides. If you have subtraction, add on both sides, right? Those inverse operations. I got down to 9x equals 45. What did I do on both sides? Divided, right? So now instead of getting rid of addition and subtraction, my next step is to get rid of any multiplication or division. And I'm going to use the multiplication division signs to symbolize that. So if there's a 9x, or in an example later, like if there's 8x or something like that, divide both sides by 8, divide both sides by 9, whatever that number is in front of my variable. My last step is to then simplify and check my answer. Okay, and you should do that each time. So simplify that step here, the 45 divided by the 9 is 5. And then check your answer, plug it back in, and see if you get the same thing on either side. Okay. Any questions about that first example? All right, let's do another example together. So say I have 2 times 4x plus 7 is equal to 62. Two times 4x plus 7 is equal to 62. Okay. My first step is to distribute, which means I'm going to take this 2 and multiply it by the 4x and the 7, right? Well, what's 2 times 4x? 8x, right? I multiply the numbers together, the variable tags along. What's 2 times 7? 14, good. So like I said, you can skip this step here where you put them both in parentheses and you can just move on to simplifying right away, right? 2 times 4x is 8x, 2 times 7 is 14.
You see the first step is distribute. Does anybody know why you're distributing? your left. Okay. Something a little bit more clear with these here. So I'm gonna take it as your silence, as you're not sure. Anybody on? Anybody online as well? Does anybody know why you are distributing first? So sometimes when you know why you're doing something, it might make things a little more understandable. You have parentheses there. So that when you distribute, you are getting rid of what?
What happens from this line to this line? What goes away? Right, the outside of the parentheses, right? So the parentheses themselves go away. So what Ms. Smith's trying to get us to say is, when we see an equation with parentheses, right, we're trying to get rid of that. We're trying to make sure that we can break down everything inside that expression that's inside. So in order to do that, we distribute to eliminate parentheses and we solve our equation the way that we had before. So it's just an extra step from what we learned yesterday, but it makes it easier for us to simplify and solve when we take that first step to do that, okay? Really good point. Second step, so after we distribute, is to get rid of addition and subtraction. So what should I do on both sides here? Subtract 14, right? And what's going to be left over on the left-hand side? So after I subtract 14 from 14, what happens to these numbers here? Cancel out. And I'm left with what? You okay?
Can I go get some water? Yeah, I don't know. Can't.
Yeah. What's that? The 8x, right?
Thank you, Dustin. I'm gonna start calling on people, guys. Come on.
What's 62 minus 14? $48, good. And I've gotten rid of any addition and subtraction now, right? Just by simplifying. Well, now I have to get rid of any multiplication and division. So what do I have to do on both sides here? Let's hear from somebody new. Iris? Divide by what number? 8, right?
Yeah.
And the 8s will now cancel, so I'm left with x. And what's 48 divided by 8? 48 divided by 8? 6.
That's all right.
That's okay.
Use calculator if we need to.
Yeah, use any resource that's going to get you to that final answer. Okay. So I get x equals 6. Any questions about that example? So one thing I want us to notice, if we were to plug in 6, 4 times 6 is 24. 24 plus 7 is 31. 2 times 31 is 62. We would have gotten the same thing on both sides. Okay. Let's take a look at one more example. Let's just make sure we understand this process. I have 3 times 3x plus 4 equals 39. All right. Yeah, that's probably a good call. 3 times 3x plus 4 equals 39. What's the first thing I need to do? Somebody tell me the first step. Distribute. Good. Distribute the 3. What's 3 times 3x? 9x. What's 3 times 4? Does anything change on my right-hand side? No, right? It's just equal to 39. Good. Somebody new. What's my next step? So what do I have to do from here? So I've distributed. What should I do on both sides now? Minus 12. Good. Let's subtract 12 from both sides. 12 minus 12 is going to give me what? 0, right? Those are going to cancel out. What's left over? Just the 9x, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say the right-hand side? Iris, what's on the right-hand side with 39 minus 12? 27, good. And what's my very last step from here? Divide by 9, awesome. What's 27 divided by 9? 3. So my answer is x equals 3. If you were to plug 3 back in, 3 times 3 is 9. 9 plus 4 is 13. 13 times 3 is 39. You would get 39 equals 39 on both sides. Okay. So that allows me to check to say, okay, well, that is in fact the correct solution. Any questions about that last example? Anything that we saw at all today? So solving equations with parentheses, we use the distributive property, and then we go and solve our equation the way that we know how. There are 2 steps, right? Get rid of addition, subtraction, multiply and divide, and then simplify. Everybody good? Okay.